The thunder cracked like a whip across the darkening Montana sky as Olivia O'Brien clutched her 2-month-old daughter closer to her chest, the threadbare blanket doing little to shield the infant from the biting wind that heralded the coming storm. The year was 1879, and Olivia found herself abandoned on the outskirts of Copper Creek, a small but growing mining town nestled in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains. "Hush now, Alice," Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind as she rocked her fussing infant. "We'll find shelter soon." Her husband, no. Her former husband Thomas had left them here, driving away in their wagon with all their possessions and the money they'd saved for their fresh start. The bitter irony wasn't lost on Olivia. They had come west for a new beginning, only for Thomas to abandon them when the responsibilities of fatherhood proved too burdensome. The first drops of rain fell, cold and sharp as needles against her skin. Olivia hunched over Alice protectively, her own body trembling as much from fear as from the cold. The nearest building was a small church perhaps half a mile away, its white steeple barely visible through the gathering gloom. "We can make it, sweet one," she murmured, adjusting the blanket around Alice's tiny face. "Just a little walk and we'll be dry." But as she took her first steps, the heavens opened. Rain poured down in sheets, soaking through her cotton dress and turning the dirt road into mud that pulled at her worn boots. The wind strengthened, driving the rain sideways, and Alice began to wail in earnest, her cries piercing Olivia's heart. Panic seized her as she realized they wouldn't reach the church before the storm worsened. Alice's cries grew more frantic, and Olivia's tears mingled with the rain on her face. She had never felt more alone, more desperate. The sound of hoofbeats approached from behind, barely audible over the storm. Olivia turned to see a rider on a sturdy chestnut horse approaching. He wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the rain, a dark duster billowing around him. "Madam!" he called out, reining his horse to a stop beside her. "What in tarnation are you doing out here in this weather?" Olivia looked up, squinting through the rain to see the face beneath the hat. A strong jaw shadowed with stubble, eyes as blue as a summer sky, and a concerned frown directed at her and her crying bundle. I've nowhere to go," she admitted, her voice breaking. "My husband left us here. We need shelter, please, for my baby." The stranger's frown deepened as he assessed their situation. He dismounted in one fluid motion, boots splashing in the mud as he approached. Up close, Olivia could see he was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by sun and wind but not unkind. "Name's Ethan Zane," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "Ranch is about 2 miles west of here." Olivia clutched Alice tighter. "I'm Olivia O'Brien, and this is Alice. Please, if you could just point us toward town. Town's 5 miles east, and this storm's only getting worse." Ethan glanced at the sky, then at the wailing infant. His expression softened slightly. "Can't leave you out here to catch your death." Hope flared in Olivia's chest. "Could you take us to town? I can pay for a room once I find work." "Not tonight," Ethan said firmly, cutting her off. "Storm's too dangerous and that little one needs warmth now." He removed his duster and wrapped it around Olivia and Alice, the leather still warm from his body. "My ranch is closer. I'll take you there until the storm passes." Before Olivia could respond, Ethan gently took Alice from her arms, cradling the infant with surprising tenderness against his chest, shielding her from the rain with his broad shoulders. Then he helped Olivia onto his horse before mounting behind her, one arm secure around her waist as he held the reins with his free hand. Alice nestled between them, her cries quieting somewhat in the warmth of their bodies. "Hold tight," he instructed, his breath warm against her ear as he urged the horse forward through the storm. As they rode, Olivia found herself leaning back against the solid warmth of the stranger who had stopped to help them. The rain continued to pour, but under Ethan's duster and within the circle of his arms, Olivia felt the first stirrings of safety she had experienced in months. The journey to Ethan's ranch seemed both eternal and fleeting. The storm raged around them, but Ethan guided his horse confidently through the darkness, occasionally murmuring reassurances when the thunder startled Alice into fresh wails. Eventually, a structure loomed out of the darkness, a sturdy log cabin with a small barn beside it. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth within. Ethan reined in his horse near the porch and dismounted, carefully taking Alice before helping Olivia down. "Come on, get inside," he urged, ushering her up the steps and through the door. The cabin's interior was simple but comfortable. A main room with a stone fireplace where flames danced merrily, a wooden table with 4 chairs, a small kitchen area, and doors leading to what Olivia presumed were bedrooms. The warmth enveloped her immediately, making her realize just how cold she had become. "Sit by the fire," Ethan directed, nodding toward a rocking chair near the hearth. "I'll tend to my horse, then find some dry clothes for you and the little one." Too exhausted to argue, Olivia sank into the chair, taking Alice back into her arms. As Ethan stepped back out into the storm, Olivia gazed around the cabin, noting the surprising neatness. A bookshelf stood against one wall, filled with volumes. No feminine touches adorned the space, no lace curtains or decorative pillows, but neither was it the rough bachelor dwelling she might have expected. Alice had quieted, her tiny features relaxing as the warmth of the fire seeped into her. Olivia brushed a kiss against her daughter's forehead, whispering a prayer of thanks for their rescue. When Ethan returned, his hair and clothes were dripping, but his expression remained composed as he set a kettle to boil on the cook stove. "There's a room you can use," he said, gesturing toward one of the doors. "I'll find something dry for you to wear." "Thank you," Olivia said, her voice catching. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." Ethan's eyes met hers briefly before he looked away, seemingly uncomfortable with her gratitude. No decent man would leave a woman and child in a storm. He disappeared into another room, returning moments later with a flannel shirt and a pair of trousers. "These will be too big, but they're dry." Olivia accepted the clothes gratefully. "Do you have anything I might use for Alice? A blanket, perhaps?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "I might have something." He went to a trunk near the far wall and opened it, removing a small, well-worn quilt. "My mother made this," he explained, handling it with care. "It's clean." The quilt was beautiful, simple squares of faded blue and cream fabric, stitched together with obvious love. Olivia accepted it reverently. "It's perfect. Thank you." "The room is there," Ethan said, pointing to the door on the right. "Get changed. I'll make some coffee and heat some soup." In the small bedroom, Olivia carefully laid Alice on the bed while she changed out of her sodden dress. Ethan's clothes engulfed her, but they were blessedly dry and still held the scent of soap and fresh air. She rolled up the sleeves and pant legs, securing the latter with pieces of twine she found in a pocket. Alice fussed as Olivia unwrapped her wet blanket, her tiny face scrunching in protest at being disturbed. "I know, sweet one," Olivia murmured, quickly drying her daughter with a corner of the quilt before wrapping her securely in its warmth. The baby settled once more, her eyes drifting closed. When Olivia emerged from the bedroom, Ethan was ladling soup into bowls on the table. He glanced up, his expression unreadable as he took in the sight of her in his clothes. "The soup's hot," he said simply. "Sit and eat while you can, before the little one needs you." Olivia eased into a chair, cradling Alice in one arm while awkwardly spooning soup with the other. After a moment's observation, Ethan set down his spoon. "May I?" he asked, holding out his arms. Surprised, Olivia hesitated before carefully transferring Alice to him. The contrast between his large, calloused hands and Alice's tiny form was striking, yet he held her with confidence, settling back in his chair with the sleeping infant cradled against his chest. "You've held babies before," Olivia observed as she ate her soup, a simple but hearty vegetable and beef concoction that warmed her from the inside out. Ethan nodded, his eyes on Alice's peaceful face. "My sister has 3 little ones. I help out when I can." "You have family nearby?" "About a day's ride south. They have a farm near Silver Creek." He adjusted Alice slightly when she stirred. "You said your husband left you." Olivia's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. She set it down, appetite suddenly diminished. "Yes. Thomas and I came west from Boston 6 months ago. He had dreams of striking it rich in the silver mines, but when I discovered I was with child, he grew resentful. After Alice was born, he became more distant. Today, he said he was going to the general store for supplies." She swallowed hard. "Instead, he left us by the roadside and drove away with everything we owned." Ethan's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "Some men aren't cut out for responsibility." "I should have seen it coming," Olivia admitted. "He was charming, but always restless. My father warned me." She trailed off, the familiar pang of homesickness washing over her. "Your family's back east?" Ethan asked. Olivia nodded. "My parents are in Boston. Father is a professor at the university there. They didn't approve of Thomas or our plans to move west." Her chin lifted slightly. "I was determined to prove them wrong, to show them we could make a good life here." "And now?" "Now I have Alice to think of," Olivia said, her voice strengthening. "I won't return to Boston defeated. I'll find work in town, make our own way." Ethan studied her face, seeming to weigh her determination. "It won't be easy. Copper Creek's not much of a town yet." "I'm educated," Olivia countered. "I can read and write well. Perhaps the mine office needs a clerk, or maybe there's a school that needs a teacher." "Nearest school is in Silver Creek," Ethan replied. "Copper Creek's mostly miners and the businesses that serve them. Saloons, mostly. Not many families yet." Olivia's heart sank, but she refused to show it. "Then I'll find something else. I'm not afraid of hard work." A small smile touched Ethan's lips, the first she'd seen. It transformed his face, softening the hard angles and bringing warmth to his eyes. "I believe that," he said. "But tonight, rest. The storm won't let up until morning, and you and your daughter are safe here." The word safe resonated within Olivia. She hadn't felt safe in a very long time, certainly not during the increasingly tense months with Thomas. Yet here, in the home of a stranger, she felt the tension begin to leave her body. "Thank you, Mr. Zane," she said softly. "I don't know how I'll repay your kindness." "Ethan," he corrected. "And there's no debt. Anyone would have done the same." But they both knew that wasn't true. Many would have ridden past, unwilling to take on the burden of a stranded woman and her infant. After supper, Ethan insisted Olivia take his bed while he slept in the spare room. "It's more comfortable," he explained, brooking no argument, "and there's a cradle in there that my sister left last time she visited. Alice can sleep in that." The cradle was a simple wooden design, sturdy and well-made. Olivia laid Alice in it, tucking the quilt around her before sinking onto Ethan's bed. The mattress was firm but comfortable, the sheets clean and smelling faintly of the outdoors, as if they had been dried in the sun and wind. Exhaustion claimed her almost immediately. The rhythm of the rain on the roof and the distant rumble of thunder lulling her into a deep sleep. She woke only once during the night when Alice cried for feeding, and then drifted back to sleep with her daughter nestled beside her. Morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through the curtains. For a moment, Olivia was disoriented, the unfamiliar surroundings confusing her until memory returned. She sat up, finding Alice still sleeping peacefully. The storm had passed, leaving behind a fresh, clean smell that permeated even indoors. The sound of movement in the main room told her Ethan was already awake. Olivia quickly arranged her borrowed clothes as best she could and smoothed her tangled hair with her fingers before picking up Alice and venturing out. Ethan stood at the cook stove, frying bacon. He had shaved, she noticed, and his dark hair was damp, as if recently washed. He turned at her approach, his eyes taking in her appearance before quickly focusing on the task at hand. "Good morning," he said. "Thought you might sleep longer. You seemed exhausted." "I was," Olivia admitted, "but I'm used to early rising. May I help with breakfast?" Ethan gestured toward a bowl on the table. "If you'd like to mix up some flapjack batter, that would be welcome." Olivia placed Alice on a blanket Ethan had laid out near the fireplace, then set about mixing flour, buttermilk, and eggs. They worked in companionable silence, moving around each other in the small kitchen space with surprising ease, as if they had done this many times before. Over breakfast, Ethan outlined his plan. "I need to go into town for supplies today. I'll take you and Alice with me. The mercantile owner, Mrs. Peterson, might know of work for you." Olivia nodded, grateful for his continued assistance, but increasingly aware of her dependence on his charity. "My dress should be dry by now. I'll change before we go." Ethan cleared his throat. "About that. Your dress was in poor condition even before the rain. I have something that might suit you better." He rose and retrieved a package wrapped in brown paper from a shelf. "My sister left some clothing here. You're about the same size." Olivia opened the package to find a serviceable blue calico dress and a warm shawl. "I couldn't possibly." "Rebecca has plenty," Ethan interrupted. "She won't miss these, and you'll need proper clothing in town." Pride warred with practicality in Olivia's mind. The dress she had been wearing was indeed worn thin, with frayed cuffs and a torn hem that she had repeatedly mended. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you. I'll return them when I can afford replacements." After breakfast, Olivia changed into Rebecca's dress, which fit reasonably well. She had washed her face and tidied her hair, securing it in a simple knot at the nape of her neck. When she emerged from the bedroom, with Alice freshly changed and wrapped in a clean blanket, she caught Ethan staring. "Is something wrong?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. He shook his head slightly. "No, the dress suits you." The simple compliment brought unexpected warmth to Olivia's cheeks. She busied herself with adjusting Alice's blanket to hide her reaction. "I'm ready whenever you are." They set out for Copper Creek in Ethan's wagon, which he had retrieved from the barn. Alice, fed and changed, slept peacefully in Olivia's arms as they traveled along the muddy road. The storm had left puddles everywhere, but the morning sun was already beginning to dry the land. "Your ranch seems prosperous," Olivia observed, noting the well-maintained fences and healthy cattle in the pastures they passed. "Have you been here long?" 5 years, Ethan replied, handling the reins with easy confidence. Started with just 20 acres and a dozen head of cattle. Now I have over 200 acres and a growing herd. All on your own? I have a hand who helps with the cattle, Joe Blackwater. He's part Crow, best horseman I've ever seen. He's visiting his family on the reservation this week. Ethan glanced at her. It's not a grand operation, but it's mine, free and clear. The pride in his voice was understated, but unmistakable. Olivia found herself admiring his accomplishment. It's impressive. You've built something lasting. Ethan seemed both pleased and embarrassed by her praise. It's a good life. Quiet, but I prefer it that way. As they approached Copper Creek, Olivia's anxiety returned. The town was small but bustling, a main street lined with wooden buildings, muddy from the recent rain but busy with people going about their business. A saloon, a general store, a small hotel, and various other establishments made up the heart of the settlement. Beyond these, Olivia could see the entrance to the mine that gave the town its name and purpose. Ethan drew the wagon to a halt in front of the general store. Mrs. Peterson runs this place, he explained as he helped Olivia down. Her husband died last year, but she's kept the business going. She knows everyone in town. The bell above the door jingled as they entered the store. The interior was packed with goods barrels of flour and sugar, shelves of canned foods, bolts of fabric, tools, housewares, and sundries of all descriptions. Behind the counter stood a plump, gray-haired woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. "Ethan Zane," she called, her face brightening. "Wasn't expecting you until next week." "Storm changed my plans, Mrs. Peterson," Ethan replied, approaching the counter. "Got caught in it yesterday." Mrs. Peterson's gaze shifted to Olivia and the baby. Her eyebrows rose in silent question. "This is Mrs. Olivia O'Brien and her daughter, Alice," Ethan introduced. "Mrs. O'Brien's husband abandoned them during the storm. I found them on the East Road." Mrs. Peterson's expression softened with sympathy. "You poor dear. With a baby, no less. What kind of man would do such a thing?" Olivia lifted her chin. "One I'm better off without, it seems. Mr. Zane has been very kind, but I need to find work and a place to stay." Mrs. Peterson studied her thoughtfully. "Can you read and write?" "Yes, very well. My father is a professor. I also know arithmetic and basic bookkeeping." Mrs. Peterson tapped her fingers on the counter. "As it happens, I could use some help with the store accounts. My eyes aren't what they used to be, and the ledgers give me headaches. It wouldn't be much pay to start, but there's a room above the store you could use." Hope bloomed in Olivia's chest. "I would be very grateful for the opportunity." "There's something else," Ethan interjected. Both women turned to him in surprise. "The Widow Clark's cabin. It's been sitting empty since she passed last winter, and it's on the edge of my property. Mrs. O'Brien and Alice could stay there. It's small, but sound." Mrs. Peterson nodded slowly. "That's right. You bought old Martha's place when her son sold off her belongings. It would be more suitable for a mother and child than a room above a store." Olivia looked between them, confused. "I couldn't possibly impose further on Mr. Zane's generosity." "It's not charity," Ethan said firmly. "The cabin needs looking after, and I could use help with keeping the ranch books in order. You could work for Mrs. Peterson during the day and help me with my accounts in the evenings, room and board in exchange for your skills." The arrangement seemed too perfect, too convenient. Olivia searched Ethan's face for signs of deception or ulterior motives, but found only straightforward honesty. "It's a fair offer," Mrs. Peterson added, and safer than living alone in town, especially with the mining crowd that comes through on paydays. Olivia considered her options. She had no money, no connections in this town, and a baby to care for. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. "I accept," she said finally. "Thank you both for your kindness." "Good!" Mrs. Peterson clapped her hands. "Now, let me see that beautiful baby while Ethan gets his supplies." As Mrs. Peterson cooed over Alice, Ethan moved through the store, selecting the items he needed. Olivia noticed he added several things that were clearly for her, and Alice, a small bag of sugar, tea, extra candles, a bar of lavender soap, and a length of soft flannel. When they left the store an hour later, Olivia felt the first stirrings of hope since Thomas had driven away. She had a job, a place to stay, and the beginnings of a plan for her future. As Ethan helped her back into the wagon, his hand steady and warm on her elbow, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps things would work out after all. The widow Clark's cabin turned out to be a small but sturdy structure about a quarter-mile from Ethan's main house. It sat in a clearing surrounded by pine trees, with a small stream running nearby. The single room contained a cast-iron stove, a table with 2 chairs, a bed frame, and little else. "It needs some work," Ethan acknowledged as they stood in the doorway. "But the roof's sound, and the walls are tight. I can bring over a mattress from the main house, and there are some furnishings in my storage shed that might suit." "It's perfect," Olivia said, meaning it. The cabin might be humble, but it represented independence, a space that was hers, where she could build a life for herself and Alice. Over the next few days, the cabin was transformed. Ethan brought not only a mattress but also a rocking chair, a small dresser, and even a cradle that he claimed had been taking up space in his shed. Mrs. Peterson contributed curtains for the windows and a colorful rag rug for the floor. Joe Blackwater returned from his visit and helped Ethan repair the porch steps and chop enough firewood to last well into winter. Olivia began working at the general store 3 days a week, bringing Alice with her. The baby proved to be a draw for customers, especially the wives of miners who missed their own children back east. Mrs. Peterson doted on Alice, often insisting on holding her so Olivia could focus on the ledgers. On the days she wasn't at the store, Olivia worked on Ethan's ranch accounts, which were meticulously kept but could benefit from reorganization. She established a system that tracked expenses and income more efficiently, impressing Ethan with her quick mind and attention to detail. As October gave way to November, Olivia settled into her new routine. The cabin became a home, with small touches that reflected her growing sense of security, wildflowers in a jar on the table, a quilt Mrs. Peterson had given her spread across the bed, a shelf Ethan had built to hold the few books she had acquired. She saw Ethan daily, usually in the evening when he would stop by to check on them, often bringing fresh milk or eggs or game he had hunted. These visits gradually lengthened, with Ethan accepting her invitations to stay for supper. They would talk as they ate about the ranch, about the town's gossip that Olivia heard at the store, about books they had both read. Olivia found herself looking forward to these conversations, to Ethan's quiet humor and thoughtful observations. She noticed how his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, how gentle his large hands could be when he held Alice, how he listened intently when she spoke, as if her words mattered. For his part, Ethan seemed to relax more in her presence as the weeks passed. The reserved man who had rescued her in the storm gradually revealed himself to be well-read, intelligent, and possessed of a dry wit that often caught her by surprise. He spoke little of his past, but Olivia gleaned that he had come west after the war, seeking a fresh start away from painful memories. As winter approached, bringing shorter days and colder nights, their evening visits took on a new dimension. After supper they would sit by the fire, Ethan sometimes reading aloud from a book while Olivia mended clothing or knitted. Alice would sleep in her cradle nearby, growing stronger and more alert each day. On a particularly cold evening in early December, as snow fell softly outside the cabin windows, Ethan arrived with more than his usual contributions, a small pine tree, which he set in a bucket of sand in the corner of the cabin. "Thought you might like to have a Christmas tree," he explained somewhat self-consciously. "Rebecca always says a house isn't a home during the holidays without one." Olivia was touched by the gesture. "It's wonderful, Ethan. Thank you. I brought these too." He produced a small box containing a few simple ornaments, wooden stars, pine cones dipped in wax, a small angel made of cloth. "They're not much. They're perfect," Olivia assured him, already arranging them on the tree's branches. "Alice's first Christmas should be special, even if she's too young to remember it." Ethan watched her work, his expression thoughtful. "You've made this place into a real home," he observed. "It's good to see it lived in again." "It feels like home," Olivia admitted, "more than anywhere has in a long time." Their eyes met across the small room, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgment of the comfort they had found in each other's company, of the routine they had established that increasingly resembled a shared life. The moment was broken by Alice's stirring in her cradle. Ethan moved to her before Olivia could, lifting the baby with practiced ease. "Hello there, little miss," he murmured, his voice taking on the gentle tone he reserved for Alice. "Are you ready to see your first Christmas tree?" Olivia's heart tightened at the sight of them, this strong, quiet man cradling her daughter with such tenderness. Alice had begun to recognize Ethan, smiling and reaching for him whenever he appeared, and Ethan, for all his initial reserve, had fallen completely under the spell of Alice's toothless grins and curious blue eyes. As Ethan held Alice up to see the ornaments, pointing out each one and telling her what it was, Olivia realized with sudden clarity that she was falling in love with him. The knowledge should have frightened her. She was still legally married to Thomas after all, and her judgment in men had proven flawed before. But watching Ethan with Alice, she felt only certainty. Later, after Alice had been fed and returned to her cradle, Olivia and Ethan sat before the fire, a comfortable silence between them. Snow continued to fall outside, muffling the world in white. "I should go," Ethan said eventually, though he made no move to leave. "The snow's getting deeper." "You could stay," Olivia suggested, then hurried to clarify when his eyebrows rose. "I mean, on the chair. If the storm worsens, it wouldn't be proper, but it would be safer than traveling through a blizzard." Ethan studied her face for a long moment. "It's not that far to my house. I'll be fine." He stood, retrieving his coat from the hook by the door. "But thank you for the concern." Olivia rose as well, suddenly awkward. "Of course. Olivia," Ethan interrupted, his voice gentle. "You're still married." The statement hung in the air between them, acknowledging what neither had spoken aloud before. Olivia's cheeks burned with embarrassment. "I know. I didn't mean to suggest—" "I know you didn't." Ethan's expression was kind but resolute. "But there are proprieties to consider, especially in a small town. Your reputation matters, for your sake and Alice's." Olivia nodded, grateful for his understanding but also strangely disappointed. "You're right. Of course. Ethan buttoned his coat and donned his hat. At the door, he paused, turning back to her. For what it's worth, Thomas O'Brien is a fool who didn't deserve either of you. Before Olivia could respond, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. She stood there for a long moment, listening to his footsteps crunching through the snow, feeling a curious mixture of embarrassment, longing, and hope. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the world transformed by 6 inches of fresh snow. Olivia bundled Alice warmly and ventured out to feed the chickens Ethan had given her. The air was crisp, her breath forming clouds as she scattered feed for the clucking hens. Ethan appeared as she was finishing, leading his horse through the snow-covered path between his house and her cabin. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept well. But he smiled when he saw them. "Good morning," he called. "Thought I'd check if you needed anything after the storm." "We're fine," Olivia assured him. "The cabin stayed warm all night." He nodded, seemingly relieved. "I'm heading into town for mail. Any messages for Mrs. Peterson?" "Tell her we'll be in tomorrow, weather permitting." Olivia hesitated, then added, "Ethan, about last night?" "No need to discuss it," he said quickly. "It's forgotten." But it wasn't forgotten, not for either of them. In the days that followed, a new awareness colored their interactions, a consciousness of the feelings growing between them and the obstacles that stood in their way. Christmas arrived, bringing a festive atmosphere to Copper Creek. The saloons were decorated with ribbons and greenery, and even the miners made efforts to celebrate, many sending extra money back east to families they hadn't seen in years. Mrs. Peterson closed the store early on Christmas Eve, pressing a small package into Olivia's hands before she left. "For Alice," she explained, "every child should have something special for Christmas." The package contained a beautiful doll with a porcelain head and cloth body, dressed in a blue gown that matched Alice's eyes. Olivia was overwhelmed by the generosity. "I can't accept this," she protested. "It's too valuable." Mrs. Peterson waved away her objections. "I had it made for my granddaughter, but my son's family decided to stay in Denver this winter. It would make me happy to know it's being loved." That evening, Ethan arrived at the cabin with his arms full of parcels, a ham for their Christmas dinner, a bottle of blackberry wine, and gifts wrapped in brown paper and string. His cheeks and nose were red from the cold, his eyes bright as he stomped snow from his boots at the door. "Merry Christmas," he greeted, setting his burdens on the table. "Thought we might celebrate together if you don't mind the company." Olivia had been hoping he would come. "We'd love that. I've been cooking all afternoon." Indeed, the cabin was filled with delicious aromas, roasted potatoes, apple pie, and bread fresh from the oven. Alice lay on her blanket near the fire, batting at a wooden rattle that Joe Blackwater had carved for her. They ate by candlelight, the pine tree glowing in the corner with its simple ornaments. Ethan had brought cranberries, which Olivia had strung into a garland that circled the small tree. The meal was the best either had enjoyed in some time, made special by the occasion and the company. After they had eaten their fill, Ethan insisted on washing the dishes while Olivia nursed Alice. When the baby was settled in her cradle, Ethan retrieved the gifts he had brought. "This one's for Alice," he said, handing Olivia a soft package, "and this is for you." Olivia unwrapped Alice's gift first, a tiny buckskin dress with delicate beadwork along the hem. "It's beautiful," she breathed, running her fingers over the soft leather. "Joe's wife made it," Ethan explained. "She said every little girl should have a proper dress." Olivia's own gift was a leather-bound journal, its pages creamy and blank waiting to be filled. "I noticed you writing sometimes on scraps of paper," Ethan said, looking somewhat embarrassed. "Thought you might like something proper to write in." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. The journal was exactly what she would have chosen for herself, a place to record her thoughts and hopes, to process the tumultuous changes in her life. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's perfect." She reached under the bed and withdrew a package of her own. "I have something for you, too." Ethan unwrapped it carefully, revealing a hand-knitted scarf in deep blue wool. "You made this?" he asked, running his fingers over the even stitches. Olivia nodded. "In the evenings, after Alice was asleep. The color matches your eyes." Ethan wrapped the scarf around his neck, the gesture unexpectedly intimate. "No one's made me anything in a long time," he said quietly. "Thank you." They sat by the fire afterward, sipping the blackberry wine as the hours of Christmas Eve slipped away. Their conversation wandered from topic to topic, memories of childhood Christmases, hopes for the coming year, stories of the people they had known. As midnight approached, Ethan rose reluctantly. "I should let you get some rest." Olivia didn't want him to leave, but she understood the boundaries he had established. "Thank you for making this Christmas special," she said, walking him to the door, "for Alice and for me." Ethan paused, his hand on the doorknob. In the soft light of the cabin, his face was shadowed, but his eyes were clear and direct as they met hers. "Olivia," he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with his words. "I want you to know that if your situation changes, He trailed off, then tried again. "What I mean to say is, I care for you, and for Alice, very much." It was the closest he had come to declaring his feelings, and Olivia's heart raced at the implications. "I care for you too, Ethan," she said softly. "More than I should, perhaps." He nodded, accepting her words without reaching for her, though she could see the restraint it cost him. "Merry Christmas, Olivia," he said finally. "Merry Christmas, Ethan." After he left, Olivia stood by the window for a long time, watching his figure disappear into the snowy night, her thoughts a whirl of longing and uncertainty. Thomas was still her husband in the eyes of the law, absent though he was. Until that changed, she and Ethan could only exist in this limbo of unspoken feelings and careful distance. Winter settled fully over the Montana territory, bringing deep snow and bitter cold. January passed in a blur of routine work at the store, evenings by the fire, Ethan's regular visits. Alice grew and changed daily, learning to roll over, to grasp objects with increasing coordination, to laugh with infectious delight when Ethan made silly faces at her. February brought news that shattered the peaceful rhythm of their lives. Olivia was at the store, organizing a new shipment of goods, when the door opened, bringing a gust of cold air and the mail carrier, Jim Hollis. "Letter for you, Mrs. O'Brien," he announced, holding out an envelope. "Postmarks from Butte." Olivia accepted the letter with surprise. She knew no one in Butte. The handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar, the paper of good quality. She broke the seal and unfolded the single page within. The letter was from a lawyer, informing her that Thomas O'Brien had been killed in a mining accident in Butte 2 weeks prior. As his widow, she was entitled to his effects, which consisted of a small sum of money, his final wages, and personal items that could be collected from the lawyer's office at her convenience. Olivia sank onto a nearby chair, the letter trembling in her hands. Thomas was dead. Her husband, who had abandoned her and Alice, who had broken her trust in her heart, was gone forever. Mrs. Peterson hurried over, concern etched on her face. "What is it, dear? Bad news?" "My husband is dead," Olivia said, the words sounding strange to her own ears. "He died in a mining accident in Butte." "Oh, my poor girl." Mrs. Peterson wrapped a comforting arm around her shoulders. "What a shock. Though after what he did to you and little Alice." Olivia nodded, understanding what the older woman left unspoken. Thomas's death was not a tragedy in the conventional sense. He had forfeited any claim to her grief when he drove away, leaving her and their infant to the mercy of strangers. Yet she felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief, sadness for what might have been, and guilt over the spark of hope that flared at the knowledge that she was now free. "Go home," Mrs. Peterson urged. "Take some time. I can manage the store." Olivia shook her head. "I'd rather stay busy. There's the inventory to finish, and—" "The inventory can wait," Mrs. Peterson said firmly. "Go home. Be with Alice. Process this news." Recognizing the wisdom in this advice, Olivia gathered her things and made her way back to the cabin, the letter tucked safely in her pocket. Alice was with Ethan's sister, Rebecca, who had been visiting for a few days and had offered to mind the baby while Olivia worked. Rebecca greeted her with surprise when she returned early. "Is everything all right? You look pale." Olivia explained the situation, showing Rebecca the letter. The other woman read it quickly, her expression sympathetic. "I'm so sorry, Olivia. What a difficult thing to process." "I'm not sure what I feel," Olivia admitted, taking Alice from Rebecca's arms and holding her close, drawing comfort from her daughter's solid warmth. "It seems wrong to feel relieved, but I can't pretend I'm devastated." "There's no right way to feel," Rebecca assured her. "Thomas made his choices, and they weren't honorable ones. You're allowed to feel whatever you're feeling." After Rebecca left, Olivia sat with Alice in the rocking chair, watching the snow fall outside the window, turning the day's events over in her mind. Thomas was gone, and with him, the last legal tie that had kept her and Ethan apart. When Ethan arrived that evening, he knew immediately that something had happened. "Rebecca told me," he said simply, setting down the firewood he had brought. "Are you all right?" Olivia nodded, gesturing for him to sit. "It's strange. I barely knew him, really. We were married less than a year, and he was gone more than he was present, even before he left us. I feel sorry for him, dying alone in a strange place." Ethan listened without interrupting, his face grave. "He made his choices," he said eventually, echoing his sister's words. "Just as you've made yours, building a life here for yourself and Alice." "A life that includes you," Olivia said softly. "You've been more of a father to Alice in these few months than Thomas was in her entire life." Ethan's expression softened. "She's easy to love. So is her mother." The words hung in the air between them, a declaration that needed no elaboration. Olivia felt her cheeks warm, but she didn't look away from his steady gaze. "The lawyer says there's some money," she said after a moment. "Thomas's final wages. Not much, but enough to give Alice something from her father, perhaps a small savings for her future." "That's good," Ethan agreed. "She should have that." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the fire crackling in the stove, Alice sleeping peacefully in her cradle. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white. "Olivia," Ethan said finally, his voice low, "I know this is a difficult time and there's no rush for anything, but I want you to know that my feelings haven't changed. When you're ready, if you're ever ready." He trailed off, but his meaning was clear. Olivia reached across the space between them and took his hand, her fingers twining with his. "I think I've been ready for some time," she admitted, but it seemed wrong while Thomas was still. "I understand," Ethan assured her, "and I respect the proper mourning period, for appearance's sake if nothing else. But when that time is past, I hope you'll consider a future with me. Both of you." Olivia squeezed his hand, her heart full. "We will." The following weeks brought the first hints of spring to Montana, longer days, the occasional thaw that revealed patches of earth beneath the snow, birds returning from their winter migrations. March arrived with its characteristic winds, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, heralding the change of seasons. Olivia traveled to Butte with Ethan to collect Thomas's effects from the lawyer. The money was indeed modest, just over $50, but there were also a few personal items: a pocket watch that had belonged to Thomas's father, a small Bible, and surprisingly, a letter addressed to Olivia. She read it privately that evening after returning to the cabin. Thomas's handwriting was as she remembered, bold and slanting, the letters crowded together as if he couldn't get the words out fast enough. "Olivia," he had written, "if you're reading this, I suppose I've met an untimely end. I've instructed Lawyer Jenkins to find you if anything happens to me. I want you to know I regret leaving you and the baby. It was cowardly, and I've thought of you both often. The mining life suited me better than family life. But that's my failing, not yours. You deserved better than what I gave you. I hope you've found happiness, or at least peace. The money isn't much, but it's yours by right. Use it for our child. Tell her about me someday, if you think it right, though I've given you little reason to speak well of me. I am sorry, for whatever that's worth now. Thomas." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes as she folded the letter. It wasn't an adequate apology, nor did it erase the hardship he had caused, but it was something in acknowledgement of his wrongdoing, a small attempt at amends. For Alice's sake. She was glad to have this piece of her father, this evidence that he had thought of them, however belatedly. April brought true spring, the snow retreating to reveal tender green shoots and early wildflowers. The land came alive again, and with it, a sense of renewal that echoed in Olivia's heart. She had observed a modest mourning period for Thomas, wearing a black armband, attending a small memorial service arranged by the pastor, but as spring bloomed around her, she felt ready to move forward with her life. Ethan had been patient, maintaining their friendship while respecting her need to process Thomas's death in her own way. He continued to visit regularly, to bring supplies, to help with chores around the cabin, and to spend time with Alice, who now babbled excitedly whenever she saw him. On a particularly beautiful day in late April, when the sky was a perfect blue and wildflowers carpeted the meadow near the cabin, Ethan arrived on horseback, leading a second horse, a gentle mare with a side saddle. "I thought you might like to ride today," he suggested. "The spring air would do you good, and Alice can stay with Rebecca for a few hours." Olivia hesitated, then nodded. "I'd like that. It's been years since I've ridden." After dropping Alice at the main house, where Rebecca welcomed her with open arms, they rode out across Ethan's property. The land was beautiful in the spring sunshine, rolling hills dotted with cattle, meadows bursting with wild flowers, streams running full and clear with snowmelt. They stopped at the crest of a hill overlooking a particularly picturesque valley. Dismounting, they allowed the horses to graze while they sat on a fallen log, enjoying the view and the warm sunshine. "My father would approve of this land," Olivia remarked, gazing out over the valley. He always said the measure of a place was in the quality of its soil and water. Wise man, Ethan commented. Both are good here. That's why I chose it. He glanced at her profile, hesitating before adding, I've been thinking about expanding, building a bigger house, adding more cattle, maybe some sheep. Olivia turned to look at him, sensing there was more to this conversation than casual plans. That sounds ambitious. It would be, he agreed. Too much for one person to manage alone. His eyes held hers steadily. But not for two, perhaps. Not for a family. Olivia's heart quickened. Ethan, are you? I love you, Olivia, he said simply. I have almost since that night I found you in the storm. I love Alice as if she were my own. I want to build a life with you both if you'll have me. Joy welled up inside her, bright and boundless. Yes, she said, her voice clear and certain. Yes, I'll have you. We both will. Ethan's smile was like sunrise, transforming his usually reserved features with pure happiness. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Inside was a ring, a simple gold band set with a small diamond that caught the sunlight, sending prisms dancing. It was my mother's, Ethan explained. My father gave it to her when they came west before I was born. It's beautiful, Olivia whispered as he slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Ethan drew her close then, his kiss gentle at first, then deepening as she responded, her arms winding around his neck. When they finally parted, both were breathless, smiling at each other with the wonder of new lovers who have waited too long for this moment. I should have done that months ago, Ethan murmured, his forehead resting against hers. Olivia laughed softly. We had to wait for the right time, and now it's here. They were married in May, when the land was in full bloom. The ceremony took place at the small church in Copper Creek, with the entire town in attendance. Mrs. Peterson had spread the word, and everyone from the miners to the saloon girls turned out to see the quiet rancher wed the Boston lady who had made such a place for herself in their community. Alice, now 8 months old and beginning to pull herself up on furniture, wore a white dress that Rebecca had sewn, with tiny pink rosebuds embroidered around the hem. She sat contentedly in Mrs. Peterson's lap during the ceremony, occasionally reaching for the flowers in the older woman's hat. Olivia wore a simple gown of pale blue silk, a gift from Ethan, who had ordered it from a dressmaker in Denver. Her hair was arranged in soft curls, with a crown of wildflowers that Rebecca had woven that morning. When she walked down the aisle on Joe Blackwater's arm, he had insisted on the honor, saying he had found her first. Ethan's face reflected such joy and love that tears sprang to her eyes. The vows were traditional, but heartfelt. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan's kiss was tender, reverent, a promise of the life they would build together. The church erupted in cheers, and even the most hardened miners wiped suspiciously at their eyes. The celebration afterward was held at Ethan's ranch, soon to be their ranch. Tables were set up in the yard, laden with food contributed by everyone in town. Mrs. Peterson had baked a magnificent cake, Joe's wife had prepared traditional crow dishes, and the saloon owner had donated several cases of his best whiskey for the occasion. As the sun began to set, casting golden light over the gathering, Ethan found Olivia sitting with Alice on the porch, taking a moment's rest from the festivities. "Happy?" he asked, settling beside her, his arm slipping naturally around her waist. "Completely," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "It's more than I ever dared to hope for." After everything that happened, Ethan pressed a kiss to her temple. "Sometimes the worst storms bring the greatest blessings," he said quietly. "If Thomas hadn't left you, if it hadn't rained that night, if I hadn't been riding that road at that moment—" "Providence," Olivia murmured. "My father would call it divine intervention." "I'm inclined to agree with him." Ethan reached out to stroke Alice's cheek, smiling as the baby grabbed his finger with her tiny hand. "I've filed the adoption papers. As soon as they're processed, she'll legally be in Zane." Olivia's heart swelled with gratitude. She already is in every way that matters. The party continued well into the night, with music and dancing and laughter. When it was finally time to retire, Ethan carried Alice to her cradle in what would now be their bedroom in the main house. The widow Clark's cabin would be kept for visitors, or perhaps expanded someday for a hired hand's family. As they stood watching Alice sleep, her tiny face peaceful in the lamplight, Ethan wrapped his arms around Olivia from behind, drawing her back against his chest. "I never thought I'd have this," he confessed, his voice low in her ear. "After the war, I came west because there was nothing left for me back east. I built this ranch thinking it would be enough land, cattle, a purpose. I never imagined a family of my own." Olivia turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face. "And I never imagined finding love again after Thomas left. Certainly not with a taciturn rancher who said, 'Not tonight,' and took us home during a storm." Ethan chuckled, the sound vibrating through her. "Best decision I ever made." "For both of us," Olivia agreed, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, the sounds of the Montana night surrounding them, Olivia thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment from Boston to the Western Territories, through marriage and abandonment, storm and rescue, grief and renewal. The road had been difficult, filled with unexpected turns, but it had led her here, to Ethan's arms, to a home and a future bright with promise. Outside, a gentle spring rain began to fall, pattering on the roof in a soothing rhythm. Unlike that storm months ago, this rain brought no fear, only the promise of growth and renewal. Beside her, Ethan slept peacefully, his arm draped protectively across her waist. In the cradle nearby, Alice slumbered, safe and secure, in the knowledge even at her young age that she was deeply loved. Olivia closed her eyes, listening to the rain and the steady breathing of her husband and child. She'd been left behind in a storm with a baby, but she had found something precious in the aftermath, a love that would weather any tempest, a family forged in adversity but bound by choice and devotion. As sleep claimed her, Olivia smiled. The storm had passed, and the dawn was beautiful indeed. 10 years later, the Zane Ranch had grown into one of the most prosperous in the territory. The small cabin where Olivia had first made her home had been expanded into a comfortable guest house, while the main house had been enlarged to accommodate their growing family. Alice, now 10 years old, had her father's blue eyes and her mother's determination. She rode as well as any boy in the county, but also excelled at her studies, devouring the books that Olivia ordered regularly from Boston. She'd been joined by 2 brothers, 8-year-old Thomas, named in a gesture of forgiveness for the father she had never known, and 5-year-old William, who had his father's quiet temperament and love of the land. Olivia had established a small school on the ranch, teaching not only her own children, but also those of the neighboring ranchers and the children of the Crow families who worked seasonally on the property. Her father, finally reconciled to his daughter's Western life, had visited twice, bringing trunks of books and scientific instruments for the school. Ethan had expanded his cattle operation and added sheep, just as he had planned. The ranch employed several hands now, including Joe Blackwater, who had built a cabin for his own family on the eastern edge of the property. Mrs. Peterson had retired, selling her store to a young couple from Denver, but she still visited regularly, doting on the Zane children as if they were her own grandchildren. On the anniversary of the day Ethan had found Olivia in the storm, they always took a private moment to remember. This year, as they stood on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Ethan wrapped his arm around Olivia's waist, drawing her close against his side. 10 years, he marveled. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I found you on that road. And sometimes it feels like I've always been here, Olivia replied, leaning into his embrace. As if my life before was just preparation for finding you. Ethan pressed a kiss to her temple, his touch as tender as it had been in the early days of their marriage. Do you ever regret it? Coming west, everything that happened with Thomas. Never, Olivia said firmly. Every step of that journey, even the painful ones, brought me here. How could I regret that? From the yard came the sound of children's laughter as Thomas helped William onto the back of a gentle pony, Alice supervising with all the authority of an older sister. The sun was beginning to set, painting the Montana sky in shades of gold and crimson that took Olivia's breath away even after all these years. I love you, Ethan Zane, she said softly, turning to look up at the man who had become her world. His face was more weathered now, with lines at the corners of his eyes and strands of silver in his dark hair, but his gaze when it met hers held the same steadfast devotion it always had. And I love you, Olivia Zane, he replied, bending to kiss her, through every storm until the end of our days. As twilight settled over the ranch, Ethan and Olivia called their children in for supper. They gathered around the large oak table that Ethan had built when Alice was small, saying grace before sharing the meal and the stories of their day. Outside, a light rain began to fall, but within the walls of their home, all was warmth and light and love. The storm had long passed, but the blessing it had brought remained a family bound not by circumstance or obligation, but by a love that had begun on a rain-swept road and grown stronger with each passing day. For Olivia and Ethan, that love was shelter enough against whatever weather life might bring.